So, when we think of administrators, we think of the bean counters, which, and that's a metaphor that maybe doesn't translate everywhere. What I'm saying is that usually when we think of administrators, we think of the money people. And I want to suggest that, as Provost Morales Diaz suggested, that yes, administrators maybe are the money people, but they are also the visionaries. And they are the ones who are making the top of the sandwich that we need to do COIL. The top bun and the bottom bun are the faculty, and the middle goodness are our students. And we need our faculty and our instructors to be excited about this work, to take it on as all of you have, because I know that you are those explorers. But it also takes that vision of the administration to help us to the finish line, if we're going to use the metaphor of our future vice president. This idea that we need all of us to do this. And so today, with Jennifer Cushman, president of the University of Maine at Augusta. She comes to us from a really interesting background, and we're going to get into that and how that has led into how we're looking at COIL from her point of view. But we're going to actually start with Dr. Calvin Gantt. And I am so excited that he's here. I first met him on Zoom during the pandemic in a panel where we were celebrating the first time that we put together our EOP program, our Education Opportunity Program, which is a pre-college program for students of socioeconomically challenged backgrounds to connect in COIL with people in Caracas, with our dear colleague, Jose Luis Jimenez, and our colleague, Osvaldo Susi, in Centro Paulo Souza, in São Paulo, whole state, and then also in UNESP with the state, San Paulo State University. And you'll hear actually from players from that event later today with Abigail Bryant and Tor Orange from FIT and from SUNY administration. But I heard Calvin speak, and he just got it immediately. He got this connection of the importance of COIL, not only for the classroom, but for the whole student. And so with that, I first asked the panelists to just get their perspective, to share their distinct and unique angle to create and promote and support COIL on your campus, and why you are willing to support and finance this endeavor. So let's start with Calvin, and then we're going to move into how COIL fits into your vision, and then we're going to ask a challenge and a success, and then have them look into their crystal ball and talk about what they see going forward in the future from their purview. So let's first talk to Calvin. Hi.
So again, thank you for the chance to just connect with you all this morning. To provide some context, I know in the write-up you have a little bit of information, but I serve as the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Belonging at Monroe Community College, as well as the Executive Director of our downtown campus, which is located in the heart of Rochester, New York. For those who may not know much about Rochester, Rochester is a very, very diverse community, and we are also one of those areas in which we accept tons and tons of folks that are coming to the United States from war-torn countries. So we are um, very welcoming from that perspective. And so MCC has a unique opportunity to be able to work with different populations of students that perhaps others may not. And so in my role as the Vice President for Diversity, one of the areas that reports up through me is the Global Education and International Services Office, of which COIL runs out of. And so I've had a unique opportunity to really understand it from the inside out. My background is in that I was an EOP director for 20 years. So when they say I get it because I understand it from the EOP side and I understand it from the administration side. And, so for me, I see COIL as a transformative tool for fostering global learning and connections that align with the mission to provide equitable access to education. And I think, unfortunately, for us in the US, when we talk about education and we talk about international, we don't really think about our local diverse communities. And when I talk about local diverse communities, I talk about students who are from rural communities, students who are from first generation families, students who are low income. Those students, just as much as many other students, need to have an opportunity to learn that global perspective because the world is shrinking. And likely, if they're going into many fields, they're going to be working with people from countries outside of the US. And so, how are we preparing those students to be able to have those interface? How are they going to work collaboratively with those individuals if they don't have some kind of lived experience? So from my end, it's very much ingrained in the way that I think about how we do diversity work at MCC, and that diversity work has to be inclusive of international perspectives.
Right. Can you do me a favor and just say your title in terms of the office again, just so that everybody hears that loud and clear?
Yes, I'm the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Belonging.
Yeah.
And the Executive Director for the downtown campus.
Right. So when you say belonging, can you explain why that word is in your title?
Well, for me, it's essential. No one wants to come to school or work in an environment where they don't feel like they belong. So that's something that we talk to from every member of the college community, from the cleaning staff up to the president. It's very difficult sometimes for people to see what role they play in creating a welcoming environment for students on our campus. And so from my perspective, we spend a lot of time and energy really trying to help people recognize and understand that every individual that comes here, whether they work here or they come to visit our campus, has a purpose, and they should be treated with, a level of dignity and respect when they show up here. And so for me, that's part of the reason why that belonging aspect is in the name.
And I would love to take a poll just of the people who are in our room today. Do you have your COIL program located under your diversity, equity, and belonging program or division? Does anybody? Hands in the air. I'd love to see a show of hands. Because to me, this is a really wonderful concept. I know Dr. Whitehead might even touch on this later today. I know she's writing a book about this. So, and I'm noticing that I'm not seeing any other hands in the air. So this is an opportunity for all of you to rethink how you do and how you place COIL on your campus. So thanks, Calvin. And I'm really excited Barbara has joined us. Woo! Jazz hands. And but I think I'm going to let her settle and let's hear from Jen next. I'm sorry. Dr. Jennifer Cushman, University of Maine, Augusta, President.
Thank you, Hope. I'm really happy to be here. COIL is near and dear to my heart, and so is global learning. So let me give you a little background on this. I actually developed COIL at 4 institutions, but I used a similar approach to each one, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I began my career as a German professor at the University of Minnesota Morris, which was a public liberal arts college, and then moved to Juniata College, a small private. I was the senior international officer there. The faculty already had close international partners, so I used the international faculty travel budget to bring faculty to their partners to develop COIL courses. So that was my first experience, and that was around 2010, 2011, when COIL was starting to expand beyond SUNY. Then through an ACE Fellows year, I kind of rethought my career and realized that I needed to serve in public lesser resource students and find this global learning approach for those populations, which COIL is an amazing approach for that. I was first a couple years campus dean at Ohio University Zanesville. 30% of the faculty there were international. So we actually found an internal grant to do a cohort for faculty training and then also for faculty travel to potential partners. Then I went to Penn State Beaver, where I was the chancellor. Again, about 30% of our faculty were international. So it provides a good opportunity there to partner with their partnerships, but also Penn State Global had a lot of good international partners that we could draw from as well. As the head of the campus, I embedded kind of global learning into our strategic planning process, and especially COIL, because it really does serve lesser resource students. We got a series of grants to have a Penn State wide COIL training, and then it also enabled faculty cohorts to travel to potential partners. First, the faculty at my campus, Penn State Beaver, and then some of the other Commonwealth campuses, and then it eventually brought it to the Penn State Global, the central system. So now I'm at University of Maine at Augusta. I'm in the University of Maine system, and I'm working with a group of champions from across the university on a global learning, across the system, all of the universities, on a global learning proposal to the system, which would include supporting COIL. So in each case, I've been focusing on faculty development, and I think that's one of the key approaches to COIL for travel, for faculty champions, especially the initial faculty champions. I think once you've established COIL relationships, the travel is less important, but it's important to establish that trust between the partners. Now, why I want to do this? I want to do this now at UMA and in the University of Maine system because it is a great way to bring global learning to all students. And global learning, as we know, has traditionally been seen as elite, but it builds essential skills for people to become leaders. We are working with others whose backgrounds are different from theirs, working on a group project over a distance through technology, and learning about global interconnectedness. And we saw with the pandemic that this is crucial for people to understand, and especially our students, to help them see their place in the world. And finally, it's embedded in the curriculum, so it's not something extra, which is important for the population that University of Maine at Augusta serves.
Great, thank you so much. I think that last point that you raised about being embedded in the curriculum is a great point to just note in terms of why I wanted you to speak today, and this idea that Betsy Udy was explaining to me recently. She's at Cal State Stanislaus, and she reminded me that it takes some stepping stones and some infrastructure building to get to a place where you have global part of your curriculum, and it's not just something in your mission statement or your initiatives or your vision that you're doing lip service to. Another metaphor, people, it's something that you deem as important, but not necessarily do anything about. So it's moving from that to actually doing, and as we all know, to actually hands-on doing. And from that, I'm so excited for our third panelist, Barbara, and I'm going to butcher your last name, so if you can say your last name, that would be great. But I first met Barbara 2 years ago. The SUNY COIL Center embarked on custom workshops for Barbara and the Department of Education and the Australian government to work with Columbian universities. And we just had a wonderful time doing this, and I just realized that for all of us in the room today, it's also the administration on all levels recognize and support what we do. Countries across the world are now recognizing the importance of COIL virtual exchange. So Australia, who you're about to hear from Barbara, but also this is very true in Japan, the Netherlands, South Africa, countless countries across the Philippines. They are realizing that our workforce, our students, our people need to understand how to talk across cultures and how to work across cultures. It's not enough just to be aware. So with that, I'm turning it over to Barbara.
Thanks very much, Hope, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be part of today's discussion. My name's Barbara Klompenhauer, a Dutch surname. Like many people in Australia, I come from a migrant background, so it's a long one, but a memorable one, I hope. I am the Counsellor for Education and Research, which is a diplomatic position that specialises in education and education policies. It's somewhat unusual for a federal Department of Education to maintain these roles, but the Department of Education in Australia has had an overseas network of counsellors for many years, mostly in the Indo-Pacific, so our near region with countries from Indonesia, India, Malaysia, up to Japan and China. But in more recent years, we've opened 2 offices in the Latin America region, one in Brazil in 2014, and our newest office here in Mexico City in 2018. And those offices were opened, I think, as a reflection of the fact that Australia has seen growing student mobility from Latin America, which really has changed the relationship between Australia and the region, because perhaps historically it had fewer contacts, but thanks to international education, we've seen a transformation of Australian communities and growth in student and academics from this part of the world. So our office here in Mexico City is responsible for cooperation between Australia and Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile. And as Hope mentioned, one of the things that we've implemented during my time here in the last 3 years has been a COIL pilot between Australian universities and Colombian universities. The reason we've undertaken that project is that when I arrived here in August 2021, the world was very different, of course, and in Australia we still had closed borders, so it was a very unusual time to be coming and talking about things like student mobility. But I think one of the things that was very clear when we began engaging with our counterpart government departments, but also with university bodies, was how much COIL had transformed thinking about international education in this part of the world, and how much it had become embedded as part of strategies for building international relationships. And that's certainly continued even as physical mobility has resumed. I think one of the challenges we were trying to address in this pilot was that for our Colombian partners, they are very well organised in developing, creating connections in COIL through networks of universities. We've been partnering with CCYK, Colombia Challenge Your Knowledge, which with its members universities maintains contacts of relevant COIL coordinators across its membership. Whereas on the Australian side, I think COIL has been part of thinking, but not to the same degree. And I think in part because our system is so highly internationalized, thinking around COIL really falls more in the teaching and learning space and is not as commonly adopted. So that's been somewhat of a barrier in terms of interests on both sides and helping to facilitate relationships. And so through this pilot, we supported not only connections to be made and introductions between the Colombian and Australian universities, but also with the help of Hope and State University of New York, providing professional development training for the matched pairs to help them navigate their COIL project and to evaluate on the success afterwards. So it's been a fantastic project. We're really pleased with how it's advanced relationships. And when I say advanced, created through to advancing them. It's been amazing how quickly things have developed in a short period of time, and with almost no mobility to date, and yet already some very strong relationships, which I think is a testament to the power of well-designed COIL. So I might leave it there for the introductory remarks.
Great. And as you know, there are now COIL partner teams that have already presented internationally as a result of this pairing between Universidad Univali and also many Colombian universities with Australian universities. So very exciting. Our next question for our panelists is how COIL fits in your vision, how COIL is working with your institutional initiatives, your mission, your vision of your own program, of your area, of your institution. And we'll talk to Jen Cushman next, and we'll come back to Calvin.
All right, thanks. So I'm really thrilled to talk about the University of Maine at Augusta. One of the reasons I'm here is that I really believe in the mission of what we do. It's a young university. We're approaching our 60th anniversary next year, and 40 years of that, we've been doing distance education. So it's important to know that we have the infrastructure and the will for a program like COIL. We were founded in 1965 by the state of Maine to serve adults returning to the workforce. So it's a very interesting way to begin. We've developed into a nexus of lifelong learning. The mission right now at UMA is to transform the lives of students of every age and background across the state of Maine and beyond through access to high quality distance and on-site education, excellent student support and civic engagement, and innovative professional and liberal arts programs. And those are all important aspects of what we do. So what we really want to do is break down barriers for access to all populations to get the credentials they need, including bachelor's and master's degrees. So it's really workforce development with a liberal arts base. And I think what we're doing there, students are not just learning skills for one career, but the essential skills for any career that would come in the 21st century. And we know how important that is because we don't know what's gonna approach us, and it's to change their lives. Really, social mobility, that aspect of higher education, and we're really good at it. We have strong arts programs, we have strong business programs, anything you would think of. We also choose programs that serve Maine in particular. So there's a dearth of pilots, so we started an aviation program. Allied health is important across the country. We've got dental and nursing programs, and we do this good work through multiple points of access, modes, and locations. So we have 2 campuses and 7 centers, and we've been, again, a distance educator for decades. Over half of our course credit hours are online, and we do have a robust technology focus. So COIL just seems to be perfect for what University of Maine at Augusta does. Now, interestingly, as I've moved through my career, I see that global learning has often been seen as elitist or something extra, but COIL is egalitarian. So especially because it's embedded in the curriculum and because it builds these skills that help you become a leader. So our 60th anniversary, again, is coming up next year. We're going to have a strategic focus on diversity and global learning, that AAC&U aspect. One of the populations we're looking at to break down access is New Mainers, which is a term for immigrants and refugees coming into Maine. And they are really at the nexus of diversity and global learning. So it's a really interesting population. And I think COIL lays the groundwork for a cultural shift for us at UMA. Calvin, we want to establish some sort of multicultural global inclusion office to house this effort. And so I'm going to follow up with you and ask you about your structure because it's really interesting to me.
Perfect tee up for Calvin, I will say, but I also want to note so Jen also started EDGE, which is the SUNY COIL version at Penn State, and it flourished. And Penn State also has a very vibrant online degree program as well as face-to-face. So yes, Calvin, we're going to come back to you. Is it okay? You had an emergency. You're back.
Yes. When you're in the world of diversity, fires come when they come. You don't get to select them; they just come as they do. So I'm fine now.
Let's go.
So yes, and thank you, Jen, for teeing that up, because that is for me one of the key reasons why I'm so vested in us doing what we can with COIL. Um, I think again sometimes as we're having these conversations in the higher ed arena, we forget that our goal for everyone is high quality, accessible education that promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion. If we could keep that sentence at the top of everybody's, mind, then we should be mindful of who is excluded from that table and those discussions. Um, and when we think about those communities and we do things to ensure that those communities are engaged, then we're going to have everyone else engaged. We just are. That's just going to be part of the experience that we have. Uh, One of the things, again, that I like the most about COIL is it helps to minimize that barrier for folks who can't afford to travel abroad. That is a huge, huge situation, especially for underserved populations, that they just don't have the financing to be able to do that. And so again, are we really harming our students? And again, I think about us as a country, and I'm thinking, of course, from the US. I know we have a lot of countries represented here, but from an American standpoint, I think we're really putting ourselves in jeopardy from an international perspective because we are not providing that level of global skill learning and opportunity for the students that we're working with. And that is a divide that I don't think, we're going to be able to recover from if we aren't being, more intentional and mindful about that. I mean, if you're watching the news, you are seeing that there's a whole host of attacks in the US on DEI and rolling things back from where we are. And that is not going to serve us well. It is not going to serve us well in the international community that we espouse to be the leader of. And so for me, those are some of the real world issues that we face. And again, that intercultural experience that our students all need is something that should be incorporated into everyone's way of thinking. And so I guess I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I also, just to piggyback on what you're saying, Calvin, our colleague Abby Bryant always is telling me that it's not only about leveling the playing field about to travel, it's also like opening all of our eyes to the fact that we all have a culture that we bring to the table and how we work. And that sort of fog of culture impacts how we think about the people that we're working with. And if we can only figure out through this coached environment of what COIL provides, that we all bring these suitcases full of how things are supposed to be. And when we're in that COIL situation, we learn that we have to sort of bust up our suitcase and figure out how to do it together. And honestly, I worked internationally in 2001, and all of our students will be doing that moving forward. They will be working with people from Mumbai and with people from the Czech Republic and Australia and Maine. So in that regard, and we'll hear from some career development people later today. So Barbara, for you, how does COIL fit into the vision of what you were doing, and why did you've talked about this a little bit already?
Yes, I think it is a slightly different perspective, obviously coming from government compared to the institutions. But I think from the Department of Education's perspective, our role is really about breaking down barriers that inhibit collaboration between Australian universities, faculties, academics, and partners, in this case in Colombia. And some of that is around a lack of knowledge or experience in working with partners from that particular country, perhaps hesitation around physical distance or other barriers, time zones, even all sorts of things that make people wonder whether it's viable to work through relationships, I guess, with new partners in this part of the world. And so for us, trying to, I guess, create connections and facilitate meaningful relationships means that we're here to provide advice to both sides about how best to approach creating those productive working relationships. And I think part of that is understanding what the benefits are for both sides and making sure that you are engaging in cooperative activities that are genuinely mutually beneficial. And as I mentioned before, in Colombia, COIL is really a priority as part of the mix for international education cooperation. And I think in part driven by the need to look at different ways to provide those opportunities to develop intercultural skills. Because in all the partnerships that were formed in our pilot, the Colombian academics would talk to us about the fact that their students were largely Colombian, that they didn't have sort of the same levels of international students perhaps that we have in our Australian classrooms, that they didn't necessarily have the same multicultural diversity that Australian communities have in classrooms. And to the point around equity of access to international opportunities, had many students who didn't have the prospect of being able to fund overseas study. And so it was very important to build these opportunities into all students. I think on the Australian side, what's been fascinating to watch is although these institutions are very internationalised, COIL has offered something different to each of the faculty members that has taken part, both in terms of, I think, working with students and academics from somewhere perhaps less familiar, and that's been really interesting for the Australian students and academics to really deepen their knowledge of Colombia through this process. And understand how things work there. You know, even as the academics prepared their COIL projects, it required so much information exchange on how semesters ran or approach to grading or how this would fit in to the learning outcomes they were seeking. So it allowed deep and meaningful conversations quite quickly with people that you've just met online. But I think the other thing that's been wonderful to watch is the unexpected insights that have come from COIL projects. And one example in our pilot was a focus around Indigenous art in both the Australian and Colombian contexts and an exchange between the students, which again starts to show that there are some points of commonality or appreciation between both countries that people might not expect. And I know for the Australian students looking at their feedback, what was wonderful was that they had to go and look at Indigenous art on their campus and write up about it and share it with their Colombian counterparts. And afterwards they said, I walked past these pieces every day and never looked at them or stopped to think about what they represented. And so I really took that away from this engagement with Colombia. So it's kind of fascinating how you see your own world differently after collaborating with partners from such a sort of physically distant country, but now closer to Australia, thanks to COIL.
Thank you, Barbara. And thank you, Calvin, for putting a great blurb in the chat, which people can take a read. So as we move into our last question, we have challenges and successes which you can weave into this. How about the future? Can you share what you envision happening next in terms of COIL? I think, Jennifer, you've talked a little bit about that for University of Maine, and Calvin and Barbara. So how is COIL going to continue to thrive in your current institution or position in government? And I'll start back again with Calvin, if I can.
So how is it going to continue to grow?
Yeah,
So is this our future question?
this is our future question.
Okay. Well, for me, I'm thinking about it in terms of how do we make COIL kind of the cornerstone of kind of what we do from an educational standpoint at MCC.
Let's give that a round of applause. Yeah.
So that's my hope and mission. I am not the provost, so I do not control the academic side of the house, but I have a good partner in the provost on our campus. And whenever there are opportunities and I see things for training, for especially for those that have gone through the COIL program, they're the first ones that are on my email list when I send them. I'm asking our grants office to constantly look for, funding opportunities to expand the way that we're all thinking about it, and really trying to engage more with those departments that if you try to have conversations with them, don't see a way in which COIL can be incorporated into what they do. You don't often see folks, sadly, and at least on my campus, from biology and chemistry and some of those STEM areas, they don't necessarily see the interconnection with that. And I'm saying, do you know that the issues that are going on in Haiti with water and so you can develop something between chemistry and geography and turn it into that kind of collaborative experience for students. And so again, I think sometimes we get very discipline focused and don't think of outside of the box about the fact that the reality for most of us is whatever we got our degree in isn't exactly what we're doing. It's usually much more expanded than the thing that's actually written on the piece of paper that says, I have a degree in this thing, but I actually have a lot more background and experience in X, Y, and Z. So just figuring out, how do we have better conversations about those types of things, I think, on our respective campuses and institutions would be helpful. And I see it growing in terms of collaboration. That's the place where I think for us, it would make the most sense. Really, for me, tying it back to community-based learning and engagement. Again, we are a refugee community. And so how are we taking what we're learning and going back into the respective communities that we have right here around us? How rich is that information and knowledge? We don't have to go to Ghana to hear from students that are from Ghana when we have them right here in our community and aren't connecting with them. And so just again, breaking down some of those barriers and creating opportunities for learning right here in our region.
Right. And what a dear colleague in COIL has said, Eva Haug from the University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands in Amsterdam, which is exactly what you're talking about, Calvin, in the community, with the community, for the community. So I really appreciate what you just said. Jen, let's hear from you.
Yeah, so I'm going to do what Hope asked me to do and put in the successes and challenges. So with successes of COIL, I think the fact that COIL is still present at my past institutions is a success. That's all four of them. And this even in the higher education kind of reduction environment that we're in right now. And I think that is because of this approach to bringing faculty on as champions early on, because faculty do tend to outlast administrators. And I do hope what we're doing now at UMA will last regardless. And so here's what we're doing to allow that to happen. So a challenge that I think anybody would have for standing up COIL is obviously funding. And in particular, I think it's important to have funding for faculty to develop new courses and to travel specifically to develop COIL courses. Again, I think it helps to build that foundation of trust that you need for a partnership. If you can speak face-to-face over the course of a few days. And we are going to be finishing the proposal of this system this semester to ask for funding for faculty travel to develop the courses, among other things. And at the same time, we are working on developing COIL courses with one of our international partners, the Technical University in Liberec in Czech Republic. And we have representatives here who are helping make that happen, including Ken Elliott from University of Maine at Augusta, who will be spending time at the TUL, and Magda Nisponska from the TUL, who's our great partner. She's waving. So we're going to be working on that aspect, and we're also then going to use this as an example to help bring others along on this journey. So it's nice to have kind of a pilot or a spotlight to help others understand what is this COIL thing and what does it mean for us and for the students. So that's going to be important as we develop this sort of example. Another challenge, I think, is shifting the culture of UMA to center global inclusion. We've been all in on the inclusion piece. We've got a really diverse group of students, especially for Maine. We're breaking down barriers to access to higher education. And we have had core group of faculty doing really good work in the global area, but we have not had an institutional structure to support that. So as I mentioned, through our 60th anniversary and upcoming campaign, I really want to establish some sort of multicultural global inclusion office to house COIL. And I think that's something that will help it succeed in the future.
Wonderful, thank you. I am really excited that all 4 campuses where you have been at COIL is now thriving. Yay. So Barbara, successes, challenges, and the future.
Yeah, I think the point that Jen just made around the importance of case studies and examples and demonstrating how things can work is so important. And that really was one of the key things we were looking to achieve with this pilot, is to show that this is possible and that challenges that people might be concerned about and not necessarily the roadblocks that they think they are ahead of time. But similarly, learnings from this pilot also show where there are some challenges or things to think about in future COIL partnerships between both countries. So I think my hope for the future of what we've been doing so far and where it might go from here is really for this to be a foundation in many ways, both in terms of the relationships that have been established through the pilot. And, you know, there've been some great success stories flourishing of those relationships, whether it is joint presentations at global conferences, as you mentioned, on the insights from the public health COIL project undertaken, or one of the academics becoming so interested in this part of the world and that she successfully secured funding to come and do an academic program of teaching for a global summer program. It's really changed people's views and their trajectories, and that is very powerful, I think. But I think the challenges that we want to share as well are around some of those considerations for institutions when they're looking structurally at how they support COIL and academics undertaking COIL, because I think it is a challenge. In the Colombian side, I think all the universities we worked with had international office champions of COIL who were the contact, who were the support, who worked with different faculties to help them with their COIL processes. Whereas on the Australian side, there wasn't that same central coordination. It was really down to particular faculties and motivated academics who could see the value in this and put in the extra time to make it work. But that obviously creates issues around workload or potential burnout. You want this to be something that is part of their work rather than an additional thing on top that they're juggling with their other responsibilities. So I think there were some lessons there that we will share back with the higher education sector in Australia. But I think it's really important to first have that proof of concept that look at these fantastic outcomes. This is valuable. This can advance your institution's objectives. And here are some of the considerations about insights on the practicalities and what's needed to make this successful. So we will be sharing that back. And happily, there is a teaching and learning network in the International Education Association of Australia. So forums like that, as well as others, will be very valuable in sharing our pilot and what it's added to the conversations and insights about COIL.
Great. And now for our members here in the community who are here. Hello, Maria Christina, she made it, yay. And for those of you who are on the call, we invite you to ask questions, to make statements. there are a couple of questions and statements already, but I just want to acknowledge one big thing that I appreciate everybody on the call is talking about today, and that I think that's going to be a through line through the day today. And that is this idea of breaking down silos between diversity, equity, and inclusion on campuses as co-curricular only and international as a nice add-on to this curricular place where we're learning about each other, and those silos are melted a little bit. So I just appreciate that all of you are speaking to that. So we do have some questions from our panelists and also a statement. I'll start with a statement. Alina Slepak from University of Missouri. She's just come out with a book. Alina, make sure you put your book in the chat so everybody knows what it's called. She said, agreed, connecting COIL with projects related to local needs or communities of practice, i.e. my students are teachers and I am partnering with a professor from South Africa who has pre-service teachers, participatory action research. Yay, and you're gonna hear later today, shout out to Maria Cristina Montoya, she galvanized a movement in Colombia to do COIL. I give her huge kudos for that. With a Fulbright scholar opportunity. She took this pedagogy there. She got people excited. She got more and more universities excited. She got the US Embassy excited to give some professional development. And now this afternoon, someone who was in our Australian Colombian University exchange is presenting with students from Uni Valier. So it's just an amazing just ascent of this great work. So we do have a question here from Erin Mays. Do your institutions have COIL partner agreements that you have developed other than a memorandum of understanding between partners? How do you engage in that strategic process? Just to be clear, Erin, you actually don't need a memorandum of understanding to do COIL. So let me just put that right out there, although some schools would like that. I'm going to start to have Jen start to answer that question. And then I don't know, Calvin or Barbara, if you want to say anything, but I do know that that would be good for Jen.
So I have never developed a COIL partnership agreement. I have included it in MOUs with international partners, but not as we're going to do this, but we are going to work together for global learning, including things like COIL. I think we need to be careful in our MOUs that we're not dictating what we have to do because things change, but it's good to give examples of the kinds of things that we've agreed on to work together on. And this was the case at all of my prior institutions. And we do have an MOU with the TUL in Czech Republic, which does mention COIL. So it's good to mention it, but I wouldn't put an exclusive agreement unless you have a really robust COIL office already and you know that you can accomplish what you're setting out to do.
Yeah, I would just add to that from what we saw in the pilot that part of the appeal of COIL was the flexibility. It just meant that people could try things. It didn't have the same length of sort of waiting for agreements to be reviewed on both sides before starting any activity. It sort of allowed the proof of concept first, and then relationships can develop in many different directions that may down the track include a memorandum of understanding. But I think the tool that I saw that was very useful was that through the professional development training that was provided for the pilot participants, some of those resources to outline what both sides were looking to achieve with the COIL, to share the relevant practical information about how it was going to fit into both faculties and courses. That really detailed preparatory work before the COIL began was really valuable, and I think gave it that strategic direction and clarity for both sides, which helps with success.
So I'll add to that. And I would actually go even further and say, and it kind of responds to Marta's question or statement about teachers who um, doubt taking on the risk for doing COIL. I think part of the reason why you may have some of that or feel some of that pushback is just that flexibility. And so you want to be very careful about not creating something or putting something in place that causes people to feel like academic freedom is being challenged in some way. So I would put that out there as a caveat. Secondary to that, most institutions, especially if they're professors, have what they call their AFDR, their how they rise in the ranks and how they get promoted. It depends on, how that's written into their AFDR too. Like, is diversity a component of the AFDR? That's one of the things I've been fighting for at our institution, is that if you don't have it embedded in what has meaning to faculty, it won't go anywhere. AFDRs are part of the process for, promotion to, assistant professor, full professor. And so how do we incorporate the need for our students to be prepared to go out and work in the world that we expect them to be able to go out and work in the world, if we're not updating our own backgrounds and experiences and knowledges to be able to provide them with some understanding of how to navigate that. So, I mean, it's a tricky dance. Sure, I will say that up front. It's not easy to get any movement on AFDRs, especially if you're not the provost, like I'm not, as I said before. But I think the conversations and the discussions around this are important. We just became, for example, a primarily minority serving institution for the first time in our history. So that means that the dynamics are changing. The students that we're serving are changing. And so if we're not prepared to change with the changing nature of the students that we serve, you become obsolete, which is, again, some of the rhetoric you're hearing. What is the value added of higher education? So these are the kinds of important questions that I think we need to be tackling and be prepared to respond to when those challenges continue to come forward.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Calvin. I think you bring in a huge good point. Can you just tell the people in the audience what AFDR stands for?
I think at different schools it may be different.
But what does it mean? It's basically your promotional package.
Your
Okay.
portfolio, yes, thank you. Annual faculty professional development, yes.
Okay, great. Wonderful. You make a good case. Thank you very much. Hi, and we're gonna end. And Anu do you have a statement or a question?
A question.
Okay, I'll repeat it.
Okay. And I think Calvin has brought up a very good point
Okay,
about
actually,
rank
let's
advancement.
get you. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Hope.
Yeah.
Calvin has brought up a very good point about rank advancement. We are here at a teaching institute, a teaching intensive institution, SUNY Oneonta, and I'm curious to know from all of the panelists, what is it that has worked for faculty? Because we do have a lot of international faculty which have contacts with their home countries and are interested in doing COIL, but are wondering whether it would be valued, are wondering whether it would be, whether it would result, because it is a time-intensive endeavor. So how can it be made more possible in terms of implementing it and reflecting in the rank advancement?
Okay, we are really close to being out of time and that's a big question. Does anybody want to take a swat?
I can quickly say just, I think the trick is finding your faculty champions, so the people who are really, really interested in doing COIL, those are the people you support first. And then they do their COIL and they're so excited, and then they convince other people to do it as well. It means a lot more coming from a colleague than an administrator. And I think what the people I've started with have been the people who are from another country, who have engaged a lot in international education. So I don't need to win them over, right? But they are then the ones who can really explain to their colleagues the importance of COIL and more importantly, the importance to the students of what COIL does.
Right. So for all of the professors who are here today, we thank you because you are the ones who are making this happen. You are the ambassadors and you are on the ground and you are doing the heavy lifting. So I want to thank our three panelists today. I appreciate your points of view. I appreciate you. I appreciate you believing in the vision of this work that we all in these rooms today are so happy to be doing. So a big round of applause from our Zoom audience and our local audience for our thank you so much. And this session will be recorded and our panelists will be receiving a certificate. So thank you so much. And I just really appreciate all of you very much. All right.
Thanks to all of you. It was a pleasure.
And so say goodbye, unmute everybody and say thank you or goodbye. Yeah, we've got a lot of
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Salamat.
There you go.
Bye.
Let's hear it. Thank you. Awesome. Wonderful. Bye.